voters. The key word was growth. Milken made the firm he worked for, Drexel Burnham Lambert, famous and rich. Who was this Pied Piper of corporate paper, this king of junk bonds? He was not born to the purple. Michael Milken was born 46 years ago into a middle-class family in Encino, California, in the San Fernando Valley. He was elected head cheerleader at Birmingham High School and was a National Honor Student. He married his high school sweetheart, Lori Hackle, in 1968. They lived quietly out of the public spotlight as his business prospered. The Milkens' comfortable world would begin crashing down around them in 1986. A federal investigation into insider trading on Wall Street snares this man, a financial high-wire artist named Ivan Boesky. Boesky, facing several lifetimes in prison, makes a deal with prosecutors that includes accusing Milken of wrongdoing. The federal investigation moves into high gear, and soon Milken, too, faces the threat of long-term imprisonment. In March of 1989, a grand jury indicts Milken on 98 felony counts. Among the charges, conspiracy under the racketeering laws, fraud in the sale of securities, and insider trading, using privileged information to make a profit at the expense of other investors. Michael Milken now faced sentences that could have added up to 520 years in jail. Milken vowed to fight, maintaining his innocence. But finally, 3 years after the start of the investigation, his lawyers said he would plea bargain. The agreement they hammered out provided that Milken would plead guilty to 6 felonies, none of them involving insider trading or racketeering. Compared to the original indictment, the 6 charges were relatively minor. Milken also agreed to pay $600 million in fines and restitution, but how much time he would spend in jail was a matter for the judge. Her name was Kimber Wood, and she shocked Milken and rocked Wall Street by imposing a jail sentence of 10 years. It was a longer term than had ever been imposed for similar offenses. But Judge Wood said she wanted to set an example. Later, saying he had cooperated in 2 other cases, Judge Wood reduced his time in this federal jail to 2 years, to be followed by 3 years of full-time community service.
I told you it was too much in.
So 3 months ago, Michael Milken came home to the San Fernando Valley, to Lori and their 3 children. He no longer wore his trademark toupee. He'd had to do without that in prison and got used to being without it. Though he has paid out more than $1 billion in fines and settlements to date, Milken's personal fortune is still considerable. By the most conservative estimates, he's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Though he has never lived lavishly, as he likes to point out, he still has only 1 wife, 1 house, and 1 cat. He is banned for life from the securities business, but is allowed to make private investments. The joy of Michael Milken's homecoming was clouded by news from his doctor. A physical examination had revealed Milken was suffering from cancer of the prostate. Mr. Milken, you are suffering from prostate cancer that is inoperable. What is your condition now?
I have prostate cancer. I'm taking treatment, and I've responded positively to the treatment.
It's a lot to bear, isn't it, to have gone through what you went through, gone through the prison, and then found out when you get out that you have cancer.
Devastating might be a better word to use. I think the day I left the halfway house to come home was the day I got the results that it looked like I had prostate cancer.
What was the most difficult part of prison?
I think the most difficult part is separation from your family. It's very hard even to put into words. I think everything else pales in comparison to the separation of the family.
What were your early duties in prison?
When I first arrived in prison, I tried to apply to become an educational tutor. I was not given that opportunity. My first job was a janitor.
Cleaning toilets and...
I cleaned toilets, washed windows, stripped floors, took out the trash.
After a while in prison, you were allowed to tutor.
Out of all the inmates I taught, only 1 did not get his high school diploma. Every single other inmate successfully passed their English, social studies, science, math, literature test. And it was a challenging opportunity, and I tried to use what was a depressing environment as positive as I could.
When you finished graduate school in 1970, you wrote an article in which you said, "I have chosen Wall Street as my background for improving society." Not a lot of people thought that Wall Street was the place to go to improve society.
When I was deciding where to go to work, Barbara, I felt this future was small and medium-sized businesses, and I feel today the future is small and medium-sized business. In fact, when you're going to go to work for a company, many people think there's safety in the size of the company. You could have gone to work, for example, for Sears Roebuck 20 years ago, or a fledgling little company like Walmart. Well, had you chosen Sears, they've laid off thousands and thousands of people as they become efficient, whereas Walmart has hired thousands and thousands of people. And so my decision to go to Wall Street was to try to redirect money and investment into small and medium-sized businesses. And I felt that that was the best way that I could affect society.
At the time of your trial, you said to the judge, "Please judge me for myself and not as a symbol." Mr. Milken, you have become the symbol of all of the greed and irresponsibility of the 1980s. Why you?
Well, I don't know, Barbara. I think the first thing was a major mistake that I made and not speak out for myself. And I thought I could continue to remain a private figure. And I let other people define who I was. I think I then made even a bigger mistake. After the investigation began in 1986, when my lawyers told me that they would take care of it, and it was not a big problem, and go back and do what I was doing, and then the thing continued to grow, and I let other people speak for me, and I didn't fight for myself. So devoid of seeing the real me, we had caricature after caricature created, and I probably made more money than anyone that worked on Wall Street. So this afforded myself, as I see now, to be a likely target, and I was a private person.
In fact, Milken's junk bond deals had the highest visibility on Wall Street. Since only 700 or 800 American companies have top-rated borrowing power, the market for Milken-style alternative financing was enormous. Among the so-called junk companies helped by Milken were MCI, the long-distance challenger, and the Southland Corporation, owners of 7-Eleven. Milken helped finance Turner Broadcasting's expansion from an Atlanta TV station into 5 television networks, including CNN. In all, he developed financing plans for hundreds of companies not represented on the Fortune 500.
And what I felt was, if we could increase the flow of money to these small and medium-sized businesses, we could speed up the growth and creation of jobs in our country. And my studies had shown that these were the best investments.
Mr. Milken, I listen to you, and it's all wonderful. All these small businesses, you're helping them succeed. But what a great many people remember of the 1980s were hostile takeovers. Huge companies taking over other companies, even smaller companies taking over other companies, putting people out of work, people losing jobs, people losing their pensions, and they blame you.
Well, takeovers or hostile takeovers were not my business, Barbara.
But you backed some of those people who did the hostile takeovers. Your so-called junk bonds or high-yield bonds backed them.
High-yield bonds backed some of those people, but most of those people received their financing from banks. And Barbara, this actually would list, I'd say, another one of the mistakes I made. In 1986, I asked my firm and a number of our clients to stop making offers for other companies. I think if I would have left my firm over this issue to make a statement, that things might have been different.
What people cannot understand is that in 1 year, in the 1980s, you earned over $500 million from your company, Drexel Burnham. They cannot understand how anyone should earn that much money for giving advice. It's obscene. So?
First, my salary, Barbara, was $1,000 a week. That was the same salary I had in 1973 and the same salary I had at the end. The additional hundreds of millions of dollars came as a percentage of the profits of my business. And in our business, those profits came from investing in people and their ideas in businesses. For example, in 1984, Barbara, there was a company called Mattel that made Barbie dolls. And for 1 year, Mattel had been struggling. But I believed in Barbie. And I called up the head of Mattel, and I told him that I personally would be willing to invest $200 million in his company. There's more Barbie dolls in this country than there are people today.
So what you're saying is, as these companies you invested in became successful, this was your commission. Huge, but your commission and deserved.
Well,
yes?
Yes, but not just commissions, Barbara. We invested our money.
People knowing you made so much money has done you a lot of damage.
I discovered that in my prosecution that it became a center point somewhat in that area. Most of my money went for three things. Lori's and my money really only went for three things. 1, to pay taxes, 2, to charity, and 3, to invest in things I believed in and we believed in.
Milken's contributions to charity have been substantial. Beginning in 1982, 4 years before the federal investigations got underway, the Milken family started endowing charitable foundations.
The Milken Scholars Program, when we started it,
their biggest focus is on education, sponsoring seminars and training sessions, and funding learning programs for the disadvantaged and learning impaired.
The objective is to try to teach kids that it's fun.
Milken himself started Mike's Math Club to help teach his favorite subject to 5th and 6th graders. The Milken Family Foundation also sponsors annual awards and prizes for outstanding educators. Milken's brother Lowell presented $25,000 checks to 120 winning teachers in an opulent ceremony this spring. To date, the Milkens have committed over $500 million to charity and education. But to the general public, Michael Milken's name had become a synonym for greed. In 1989, you were indicted on 98 felony counts with a potential of 520 years in prison, and the government said that there would probably be even more indictments and counts. Up until then, you had said you were going to fight. You were going to go to trial. You were innocent. And then you had a plea bargain. Why?
Well, I think we first have to understand that it was a long period of time, Barbara. Next, we have to understand that I didn't plead to anything from that indictment as it was put in that indictment.
Your brother Lowell was indicted along with you. And it's been said that part of your reason for plea bargaining was that the indictments against your brother would be dropped. Was that in your thinking?
All these things were in my thinking when I made the decision to plead, Barbara. It had been a long 3 to 4 years. My brother had been taken a hostage who did nothing wrong. An FBI agent came to my 92-year-old grandfather's apartment to question him. Most of my friends had been interrogated. And so the decision to make was, where does it all end? I just felt at some point that I was going to spend the rest of my life with lawyers. And it was starting to affect my health, my family's health, and I didn't see any way else to end this, what was a nightmare that had gone on for years.
Well, there's much more to this story, of course, and to this man. And when we come back, what did Michael Milken actually do wrong? What did he plead guilty to?
Is Milken a criminal or a victim of his own enormous success? And why is Michael Jackson doing business with him now? Barbara continues her interview, beginning with the person who knows Michael Milken best, the woman who has stood by him for better or for worse for more than 25 years.
Even though your husband faced a massive federal indictment, you did not want him to plea bargain. You did not want him to plead guilty. This I've heard. True?
That is correct. I did not. I thought that he should go to trial.
This picture that we have read and heard of Michael Milken, introspective, suspicious, reclusive, workaholic, Do you recognize that man?
Not at all. It is the complete opposite of who Michael really is. I think this picture was created by people who have never met him. Or people who do not know him at all.
Ivan Boesky did know Michael Milken, but how well he knew him is a matter in dispute. Boesky told federal investigators that he and Milken were partners in various schemes to defraud investors. In return for implicating Milken and others, Boesky was allowed to plead guilty to only one felony count. He served 2 years in prison and paid a $100 million fine. Mr. Milken, Ivan Boesky was your accuser, and he was found guilty of insider trading. What exactly was your relationship with Ivan Boesky? What did you do for him?
I didn't know Mr. Boesky that well. He was one of thousands of clients, and I was not involved in insider trading with Mr. Boesky. I was not involved with what he paying people in suitcases, money.
To get information about stocks and bonds so he would know in advance.
Right. I was not involved in Mr. Boesky's insider trading activities. I had nothing to do with those, and I, like everyone else in Wall Street, had no knowledge that he was engaging in those activities. He was introduced to me by the head of my firm, and he was a highly respected individual on Wall Street at the time.
In early 1986, your department, under your direction, arranged $600 million in financing for Ivan Boesky. It's a big amount.
This was not a decision that I made. This is a decision my entire firm made.
Why did Ivan Boesky nail you, Michael Milken?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't think Mr. Boesky didn't nail me, Barbara.
Well, he named you. Let's put it that way.
I think that's correct. He had a lot of problems, Barbara. And you'd have to ask him that question. But I think the issues that I pled to had nothing about what the investigation started with. And I think where it started and where it ended were quite different.
Where it ended was with a plea of guilty to 6 felonies, all of them considerably less serious than those in the original 98-count indictment. Milken admitted to parking securities with Boesky, that is, illegally concealing the true ownership of the securities by putting them in another person's name. He pled guilty to mail fraud. He also admitted padding commissions, keeping phony trading records, and assisting one of his associates in the filing of a false tax return. Did you then, or do you now, regard these as crimes?
I did not regard those as crimes then, and I didn't do anything in my entire career which I thought was criminal. The things that I pled guilty to, Barbara, these regulatory reporting requirements, were not treated criminally before my case and have not been treated criminally since my case.
You know it's going to bother a lot of people today, that you're almost coming out as a saint. I mean, you did everything for the good of the people. You did nothing wrong. Did you do anything wrong, in your opinion?
I think I've done a number of things wrong, Barbara.
Do you think you made any big mistakes?
I made a lot of big mistakes.
Did you commit any crimes?
I have never made a penny dishonestly.
That's going to be very tough for people to believe.
Well, I think, Barbara, it's a question of what the truth is.
When the savings and loan banks failed, a large number of people lost a lot of money. The S&Ls bought junk bonds. Many people feel that the failure of the S&Ls rests on your shoulders. This is why they're so angry.
Well, Barbara, that's totally false.
You know this is the way people feel.
The savings and loans lost money primarily because of an investment in real estate, not junk bonds. That was one of their 2 best investments.
In 1989, the government passed a law prohibiting S&Ls from investing in junk bonds, correct?
Yes.
Why did the government tell savings and loans banks that they could no longer invest in junk bonds?
I believe it had to do with a concern over takeovers.
Big mistake to pass that law?
A terrible mistake, Barbara. It's cost the country thousands of jobs. It's hurt thousands of businesses.
How are junk bonds doing today?
Junk bonds are doing great today, Barbara. I believe in the 1990s that high-yield bonds have done better than stocks, and equities have done better than government bonds.
Years ago, you looked to the future and you saw cellular phones and you saw cable. If you were going into a new business today, what would it be? Tell us where the growth is.
Well, the business that I would be going into today is the field of education. That would be my first pick.
Anything to do with education?
Well, I don't know about anything.
Okay.
I believe some of the most exciting businesses in this country that will grow in the next 10 years, that will create tens of thousands of jobs, fall in the field of education. Teaching people how to speak foreign languages. Letting people get retrained who aren't even in school today. Let them turn their television set on and learn about how to use a computer.
I want to tell you about my friend. His name is Michael Milken.
Superstar Michael Jackson is one of Milken's partners in a plan to marry technology and education.
And he is the smartest person I know.
The two have joined forces to create an education entertainment network on cable TV. It's still in the planning stages. Jackson has been involved in Milken's foundation work with children for several years. He entertained at this year's Educator Awards. You have Michael Jackson as one of your partners. First of all, how did Mike Milken get to Michael Jackson? And then what is this?
Well, Michael actually grew up just a couple blocks from my home here, and he had an enormous love for children and some of his friends, and he had been looking to get together with me. My belief is when Michael goes on tour, and I think he's thinking of going to India and China later this year, that we should use that as a geography and a history lesson. Let him see what he's going to see on his trip, and let him see it through his eyes.
So you think it's kind of like Mike's math class. Make education fun, make it something that kids can understand, and it will be good for the kids and good for the country.
And not just kids, Barbara. If you're 60 years old and have to start thinking about a new career, we should be able to teach you about science so you enjoy it, so it's fun.
One of the things that you have tried to do is to make math fun. I read that if you hadn't gone into the brokerage house, you would have been a teacher. Most people don't have fun with math. What are some of the tricks?
Try to make all learning fun. I believe all learning can be fun. For example, Barbara, most kids by the 3rd grade have mastered the multiplication tables. 9 times 8 is 72. Now, once you've mastered your multiplication tables from 1 to 10, you can do amazing things. For example, any number that ends in 5 that's multiplied by itself. For example, 85 times 85. The answer is 7225. You take the first number, 8, and you multiply it times the number higher. 1 higher than 8 is 9. 8 times 9 is 72. And 5 times 5 is 25. So your answer is 7225.
You sure lost me, but I'm sure the kids catch on. To get back to you, do you think that your name, that your reputation will ever be fully cleared?
History has a funny way of judging people, Barbara. Most of the things I stood up for and believed in have come to be true in the last few years. I believe this period of time we went through will be looked at much the same as the McCarthy period is looked at today. That we went after things that and blew things out of proportion that didn't exist. And I think now that I have cancer and realize how little time I might have, I just feel disappointed at the loss of opportunity that I had, and that all this period of time I don't believe was needed.
So what all is he doing now?
Well, I made some notes because he certainly has a full plate. It was just yesterday that Judge Kimber Wood announced the plans for his community service. Part of his sentence, it calls for 3 years, a full 40 hours a week, working with youngsters in Los Angeles inner city, and that includes teaching math and other subjects. He has a proven record as a teacher. Then he's setting up a new organization to sponsor research and cures for prostate cancer. His own condition is quite serious. He has a project with Michael Jackson, entertainment, education, and he's been asked to teach a graduate course in finance and management at UCLA. Nobody disputes that brain. So he says he does not want to live in the past. He wants to live in the present and future.
Well, and all of this has apparently put no strain on his marriage.
This is, whatever one feels about him, this is a wonderful marriage, and 3 terrific children and brothers and cousins. It's a very close-knit family. Most of his